Hello. In this tutorial, we will be looking forward to understanding a few more advanced features of the map builder, namely usage of a lookup table, expression-based mapping, and the map attributes. To begin with, we'll start off with the lookup. Lookups are typically used when you have a scenario wherein the input data that is coming in from the source file does not need to be mapped as it is. Rather, we need to refer to some kind of a table in the database and pick up the corresponding output value and map that value rather than the actual value that is coming in. EDISHERE supports picking up of lookup values from both EDISHERE's own system database table or from user-defined DSNs. Let us first understand how this is possible. So let us open our existing map file. Let me pick up a scenario wherein I have the supplier code value coming in my data file. So suppose the value that is coming in is 45 for the supplier code value, but I do not want this value to be mapped as it is. Rather, I would want a value called say 56 to be mapped on my right hand side destination. So in such a scenario, I would go to my map for the supplier code, go to the lookup information page and configure a lookup information table. The first option is using EDISHERE's own lookup tables, wherein I would check the use default DSN option and create my lookup table by saying create S code and enter my values 45, so my corresponding value is 56, and if I have other values say 33 for which I should get 40. So this way I can enter one or more input values and corresponding output value which EDISHERE is supposed to pick up and generate. So once I have created and configured my lookup table, I can configure the action that is to be taken if the value is not found in the lookup table. So now let me just simulate this particular data file which has the value coming in as 45. So now if you see, this mapping shows you supplier code getting mapped. The input value that is coming in is the 45. The lookup table was picked up for it and the output value that got generated is 56. In the map info tab, you can view the lookup table name S code here, indicating that this was the lookup table that was used, and while generating you can see that the RFF map, the RFF element that got generated has the value as 56. Let us now pick up a data file which does not have the value 45. Let us put in some other value and see the expected reaction. Now let me simulate. Now I get a data related error telling me that the lookup information was not found for the given value 40 in the lookup table. This is because I had set the default action to be set an error if the lookup table does not have the value. I can also use the concept of use same value, wherein if the data is not found, then whatever is the input value, that gets used as it is. So for in this case, the value 40 got mapped and generated as it is. Now coming back, the third option, that is use a blank value and use a default value, wherein similarly if the input value is not found, a blank value would be generated or a default value that you have provided would be generated. When you create the lookup tables using the default DSN, this table actually gets created within the EDISHERE's own system database. You however have an option to configure your own user-defined DSNs, in which case you should uncheck the use default DSN and check the use user-defined DSN option. Create a DSN for your database table. EDISHERE supports SQL Server, Oracle and MS Access databases. So you could configure the DSN for it and select. In my case, I have created an MS Access table called HLDB. So this is my HLDB database, where I have a table called subcode, which has the value input code and output code. I would expect EDISHERE to pick up the value for the input and the corresponding output value from the table and generate the respective data. So here I select HLDB, and when I select this database, all the tables available in the database are picked up and provided to me. I can select the input code, the output code, and say OK, indicating that if this is the input value and this is the output value, that is to be picked up. So now if you see, if I simulate this file which has the input data coming in as 45, and I simulate it, then you'll observe that the output data that got generated is 56, wherein the qualifier, the lookup got picked up from the user-defined DSN table and it got generated. Coming over to the next concept after lookup, that is expression-based mapping. Expression-based mapping is a very user-friendly and highly customizable feature, wherein you can specify in your map that if this is the input value coming in, I would want a particular expression or an operation to be done on the input value prior to it getting mapped and generated. All of EDISHERE's operators through the expression builder can be used. EDISHERE's expression builder has an extensive help documented in the chapter 4, which provide you the various operations that are feasible on the data, which will provide you a lot of flexibility to work on your data and achieve the desired output. So in our case, let me pick up a simple example wherein I want the quantity that is coming in, the value, say it is 5252525. I do not want this value to be mapped as it is, rather I would want it to be multiplied by 100 prior to getting generated. So for this, I will first create a simple expression in my expression builder module, wherein I say under the all declarations and definitions, val qty100, which is the variable to hold the value of the calculated quantity field. Then I create my function on mapd, following which I create a position variable for the quantity position, indicating that segment ID is D. So this is the segment where the quantity element resides. This is the element ID, it is quantity. Syntax for all these variables and function creations are available here. For example, for the position variable, you can refer to this chapter, which provides you the syntax and example. Similarly, you have expression operators. So what I typically use was a mathematical operator for multiplication. So I can refer to the help documentation available here to come up with the syntax. Using this, I can simply create a function wherein I mention that the variable quantity 100 is equal to the value qty that is coming in this field multiplied by 100. After finishing the function, I just do a compile. If there is any error, then it will be prompted. For example, if I forgot, if there was some syntax error, then the whole line would be highlighted with the error. I can compile, apply, and OK. So what I have done is I have created a function. Now my next step would be to call the function when the record D is getting mapped. For that, I would select the record D and select the expression builder option and do a simple call at the map beginning of the entity of the D record by saying call on map D. Again, I would compile, apply, and OK. So what I have done is I have created a function to multiply the value of quantity with 100 and have made a call for that function when the record D gets mapped. Finally, in the map for quantity, I would attach an expression saying map variables only, and attach the QTY100 variable which would hold the calculated value. So the whole idea is that the input value that is coming in doesn't get mapped as it is. Rather, this particular expression executes over it, performs the calculation on it, and then generates the output data. So let us see how this particular function performs. So let me simulate it for the case wherein quantity has the value 52, 52, 52, 52. So now select this file and say simulate. So if you see here, this blue exclamation sign indicates that the source data and the destination data are not same, which means some kind of an operation was performed during mapping. So the input value was 52, 52, 52, 52, but the data that got generated was after being multiplied by 100. You can actually see what happened in the file info tab. The file info tab would give you an extensive verbose report of all the expressions that were executed at various stages of the simulation. So if you see here, it shows you clearly that the value of QTY100 was replaced here with this value, and this was the expression that called, and this was the return value of the expression. This is a simple case of expression based mapping. Many other complex functions can be written using the expression builder, and the required value can be attached in the respective maps, and the desired result can be achieved. Now coming over to the concept of map attributes. EDISHERE provides options for the user to perform various extra functions to the map attribute page. For example, map blank data with qualifier and map blank data without qualifier. So if your input file has a data coming in which has empty, or there's no data coming in, but you would still want the empty data to be mapped, then you would basically need to check this. And if you want the map to be performed without the default qualifier values being populated, then this would be checked. In case you have a case wherein the default value is to be used, the default value that is specified here, if no data is present, then you would check this. In case default value is to be used always, irrespective whether data is coming in or not, then you would check this option. Trim left and trim right would be used if you would want the data to be trimmed off spaces on the left or right before getting mapped. Override if already mapped cases are used if you have more than one maps to the same destination element, and you would want to prioritize as to what is to be done to the destination data, whether it should be overwritten with the new data coming in or should it be ignored. So we use either override or ignore if already mapped. Map to a new segment instance would be used if you have run over the number of instances and you would not need a new instance to be generated. Make uppercase would be used if the input data needs to be converted into an uppercase before getting mapped. Map using expressions only would mean that direct mapping would not be done and only expression based mapping should be done. Invalid map would mean that particular map would not get executed. Not used map is to again make a particular map not used. Map to a new parent instance would mean that the destination segment's parent segment instance would be generated fresh during this particular mapping. Map data without transformation and do not convert to basic data types are typically in scenarios when the source data format and destination data format are of varied types. Say a date time data getting mapped to an alphanumeric data, wherein you can configure whether you want the date time to be transformed to its basic data type or not, and perform actions, or else map it as it is. Trim qualifier value would trim the qualifier values before mapping. And treat pad character as data would mean that if the pad character also needs to be mapped during mapping or not. That's all with this tutorial. Thank you.